Scrolling through online therapy directories often feels like swiping on a dating app when you're already exhausted. You're presented with an endless grid of identical headshots, making the process of starting mental health care incredibly overwhelming. Faced with decision fatigue, most people default to the path of least resistance. They filter for whoever is located within a 15-minute drive and happens to have an open appointment at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. But scheduling convenience is a terrible metric for care. Clinical research consistently shows that the actual relationship between you and your therapist is the single strongest predictor of whether the treatment will actually work. When you match with someone simply because they were available, the results are predictably poor. Patients end up in sessions filled with generic nodding and listening, leading to frustration and high dropout rates after just a few weeks. This diagram outlines the friction of the traditional search. You start with high hopes, immediately hit dead ends like full wait lists or out-of-network providers, and ultimately settle for the first available warm body. Treating highly trained mental health professionals like interchangeable commodities based on your calendar availability guarantees a rocky start to the healing process. Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC, was built specifically for Georgia residents to solve this exact problem. It's a telehealth group practice designed to replace that directory roulette with a curated matching system. Instead of an infinite sea of strangers, CHC relies on a vetted team of over 15 licensed professionals. The roster includes clinical social workers, licensed professional counselors, and marriage and family therapists, selected specifically to provide a diverse and culturally competent range of perspectives. The core operating principle here is curated specialty matching. They don't just plug you into an empty time slot. They actively evaluate your specific needs and connect you with a provider who is trained to address them. The trade-off for this level of curation is volume. By choosing CHC, you are opting out of the massive open market of thousands of independent practitioners and restricting your options to their specific in-house roster. But by accepting that smaller pool, you shift the heavy logistical burden of finding the perfect fit off your own shoulders and place it directly onto the clinical practice. The CHC system engages you before you ever sit down for a session. New clients fill out an initial intake form where they explicitly identify what they are struggling with, whether that's ADHD, perinatal mental health issues, complicated grief, or trauma. Your profile enters a funnel, passes through specialty filters, and connects to a specialized clinician node. This node expands, revealing the evidence-based modalities driving your match. Indicate trauma, you get an ENDR specialist. Struggle with OCD, you're paired with an ERP expert. This system does require a high degree of upfront vulnerability. You have to be willing to clearly define your pain points on day one, rather than just silently booking a calendar slot and waiting to see how you feel. The payoff for that vulnerability is getting a provider equipped with targeted tools, rather than someone who just sits quietly while you vent. Prioritizing specific modality matching up front turns the therapy experience from a passive conversation into an active, structured clinical intervention. Delivery is the next major factor. CHC operates entirely as a HIPAA-compliant telehealth practice, which means its services span all 159 counties in Georgia. This chart compares typical out-of-pocket therapy costs against CHC's in-network pricing. By integrating with major carriers like Aetna and Cigna, copays drop to $10 to $40. The Medicaid bar isolates and drops to a $0 baseline, completely removing the financial barrier. The logistical trade-off here is steep. While you eliminate the drive time and escape geographic limits entirely, you are permanently sacrificing the physical intimacy of an in-person clinical room. That places a new responsibility squarely on you. To make telehealth work, you have to actively secure and maintain a strictly private, sound-isolated environment inside your own home for your appointment each week. CHC's architecture actively prioritizes this statewide access and exact cost certainty over the traditional comforts of a brick-and-mortar office. Even with a robust, data-driven matching system, human dynamics are unpredictable. Sometimes a therapeutic relationship simply doesn't click. To address this, CHC actively encourages what they call a permission to switch policy. If you feel misaligned with your provider after 3 or 4 sessions, you aren't stuck. You can request to be rematched with a completely different clinician on the roster, and there is no additional charge or penalty for making the move. Utilizing this safety net requires you to practice explicit self-advocacy. You have to be willing to clearly voice your discomfort to the practice, rather than just quietly canceling your next appointment and giving up. By actively normalizing this switching process internally, the practice protects your continuity of care and prevents a temporary mismatch from turning into total therapy abandonment. So, who exactly benefits from trading traditional open market therapy for a highly structured telehealth group practice? CHC replaces the exhausting guesswork of directory self-sourcing with a system built on precise matching and aggressive affordability. This split-screen scorecard matrix organizes the trade-offs. On the left are the ideal candidates for this system, and on the right are those who would be better served elsewhere. Looking at the left column, the first ideal profile is a rural or isolated Georgia resident relying on Medicaid. Securing expert care for a $0 copay without having to drive an hour each way offers an unbeatable return on your time. The second bullet point highlights the time-poor optimizer. If you have complex clinical needs and require fast, screen-based access to a highly trained specialist without disrupting your workday, this model fits perfectly. Moving to the right column, this system will fail for patients who simply cannot secure a private, quiet space at home, or those who absolutely require in-person body language reading to feel emotionally safe. If you sit that right column profile, avoid the CHC model entirely. Accept the high friction of traditional directories and commit the time needed to find a local, brick-and-mortar provider. But if your situation aligns with the ideal candidate profiles, securing your mental health care shouldn't require playing roulette with an overwhelming search tool. When a clinical practice structurally prioritizes precise specialty alignment and cultural fit over mere geographic convenience, patients experience significantly less guesswork, faster engagement, and a much clearer